Good afternoon, and welcome to Venice, welcome to Ca' Foscari. I'm quite pleased today to introduce another lecture, another international lecture. This is the 19th one. We had a long series of distinguished speakers in these last 2 days for these international lectures. And today, no exception, we have another very important and quite interesting speaker, Professor Boiazzi. Richard Boiazzi is professor in the Department of Organizational Behavioral Psychology and Cognitive Science at the Case Western University. He is very well known. I'm really very pleased and honored to have him here today because his research on competencies in particular, a topic which is at the heart of one of our research activities here in Ca' Foscari, are very well known worldwide. He's very well known among human research managers, among business leaders, and recently, as he has been considered one of the most influential persons in the field of human research management. He has an experience also as a manager himself, as a CEO of companies, but he's more than anything else a professor who has been able to join different skills and competencies himself, and maybe from neurosciences to management. His field of knowledge is quite wide. And today we will experience what he can tell us and what he knows and what he discovers in his research activities on competencies. This is very important for Ca' Foscari because, as some of you heard this morning, we are developing a competency center to give our students more opportunities to learn what they are and to prepare for the job market they will face after their studies at Ca' Foscari. And it's a new service, a new support that we want to give to our students, and Richard help has been very important, has been crucial to develop the first steps of our project, and will be crucial and very important in the subsequent steps this year and in the forthcoming year. And just a few minutes ago, he told me that he will be back to Venice because he wants to collaborate with us in these future research activities. I'm very pleased to know that it will be with us again. Let me stop here. I would like to give the floor to Professor Boiazzi. Let me thank Anna Comacchio and Fabrizio Cerli, the two professors of Ca' Foscari are leading this research project, and then they will interact with all of you and with Richard after the lecture. Thank you again. Thank you all for being here, and please, the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Carlo, Fabrizio, Anna, for having me here. I started with the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, for a very specific reason about learning. It turns out neurologically, you will forget almost 60% of anything you learn by the next day if you don't arouse your emotional or your limbic brain. Could you turn this down a little, the volume? If you don't arouse your limbic brain as much as your neocortical or your thinking brain. And you're coming here to the university, you're coming for a lecture, of course your neocortical brain is already primed. So what I have to do is try to arouse your emotional brain as much. And there's two quick ways to do it. You can do it through music, you can do it through humor. So that's why I chose the Queen of Soul. You could do it through sense of smell, but I haven't figured out how to do that in kind of polite society. But at any rate. Well, I'm really excited. I mean, Anna and Fabrizio and I have been working together for 15, 18 years. Of course, Anna was only 12 when we started, right? And Arnaldo Comulfo before, that what's being launched here is a part of a tradition. And now with the Competency Center, this is going to propel the work and the utility of it to people in organizations phenomenally, and the research, and even more, will I believe, make Ca' Foscari a distinct university in all of Europe and the world. But let me not get ahead of myself. The reason I'm here today is to talk about two things. One, what is great leadership? And then the real reason we're talking about the first is how do we nurture it and develop it? So what I'd like to do is start by just the observation that great leaders understand that emotion is the music of leadership. That's how we do it. Emotion ends up being the carrier wave for the content of anything we talk about as a leader in organizations, in families, in social groups. The problem is 60 years of research in social psychology has proved that people don't get influenced by and make rational decisions. People make decisions based on emotional arguments, and then you use rational arguments later, afterwards, to make yourself feel better. And even economists would agree with that, right? Okay, good. So, that's the anchor, right, of our management discipline. So I can't prove this to you. There's no amount of statistics I can show you that'll make you believe this. But I think I might be able to get you to prove it to yourself. So we're going to do the first of several exercises we're going to do. So I'd like you on a piece of paper. Yeah, come on. You came to school. You have to have a piece of paper. Really, you're going to write this. So on a piece of paper, create 2 columns. You know, 2 columns. On the top of the left-hand column, write the name of, need a pen? Oh, okay. Write the name of a leader you've worked with or for who brought out the best in you. Somebody who was exciting to work with. Somebody who, if they took over a different division of your organization, you'd seek a transfer to work with them. You have to write a specific name, otherwise the exercise doesn't work. You guys need paper? Anybody else need paper? We have paper up here. Pens? You need a pen? I'll lend you mine, but I need it back. It's my autographing pen. Thanks. Okay, so now on the top of the right-hand column, write the name of a leader that did not bring out the best in you, that you worked with or for, somebody who you thought was a lump. Whatever they were paid, it was too much, even if it was a volunteer organization. The kind of person who, if they were a key executive, you know, at Ca' Foscari, for example, that Ca' Foscari would do really much better if you got them a job at Sda Bocconi, you know, kind of thing. Underneath each of the names, what I'd like you to do is to remember what it was like to be around them. That when you watched them or you were around them, what did they typically say or do? How did they make you and other people around them feel? And write down a number of things under each person's name, and then I'm going to ask you for your observations. A leader who brought out the best in you in some work or school or community activity, could be a sports team, on the left, and the name of a leader who did not bring out the best in you on the right. What did they typically say or do? When I ask you for the ideas about what you wrote down, I'm not going to ask you for the names of the people. So you don't have to worry about that. So if you're a student and you haven't worked in many organizations outside of the university or school, it could be somebody who was leading a program, a leader in a church activity or a sports activity or some community activity. Band. Underneath each of their names, try to write down a few examples of what did they usually say or do. How did they make you and other people around them feel? Can't think of anybody? Either side. Some people need paper up here. Okay, most of you have a number of things down under each. I apologize. To try to get the exercises in and finish before midnight, I have to move us along. Now, this doesn't work unless you participate for a couple reasons. One, this whole thing this afternoon is about emotions and relationships. And unless you do the exercise, you don't connect with the emotions. So it'd be as dry as reading an academic article, i.e. a waste of time. So if you do the exercises, it really helps. And most of you have, that's good. But now I'm going to need you to offer your thoughts. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to hear from you about the person on the left, the one who brought out the best in you. What did they typically say or do? How did they make you and others feel? Thank you. Challenged. Good. Thank you. Now, Carlo didn't say in my introduction, but during the 70s, I was a clinical psychologist. After I finished my doctorate, I worked with alcoholics and drug addicts for 10 years. So when you're trained as a clinical psychologist, you're trained to, after you ask a question, to wait for 20 minutes for an answer. So we're going to be here a long time if you don't volunteer a little more. I appreciated yours. Yes? Confident? Enthusiasm? Good. It's okay. Enthusiasm also. Empowered? Good. I'm sorry? Full of energy. You were or they were? Both. Okay. They were and it made you feel that way. Candor. Vision. Smiled. Right. Happiness. Love. Warm. Thank you. Open-minded. Passionate in what they do. Good. Interactive. Looks directly at you, right? In that sense, engages you directly. I'm sorry? Motivated. That you felt motivated or they were? You felt motivated. Okay, good. Thank you. Example?
They were an example.
Oh, they were an example. In other words, they demonstrated, they showed the things they talked about. Good. Thank you.
They usually say, good job.
They usually congratulate you, say, good job. I'm sorry?
Take your time.
Take your time. Oh, nice one. In this world of rush, rush, rush. Okay, now, we're not getting anything from the people back here. And besides being a therapist, I also am a professor, so I call on people. So you have a nice list there.
Let's work together.
Let's work together. Great. Good. Respected. Team working. Good.
Someone who listened to me and paid attention.
Ah, they listened to you and paid attention to what you were saying. Hope. Supported. Great list. What about the person on the right, the one who did not bring out the best in you? Lack of respect. I'm sorry? Indifference. Ooh, yeah. They blamed others. Arrogant. Anger. Negative. Only answered the questions that suited them, him or her. Control. Criticized? Oh, politicized. Sorry. Thank you.
He didn't love what he was doing.
He didn't love what he was doing. Others? No information sharing. Yep, we see that a lot. Nothing engaging. Right, sorry. That's right, nothing engaging.
Judging the person instead of the act.
Yeah, judging the person instead of the act. Great list. This is a great list.
They don't allow you to be yourself.
They don't allow you to be yourself. It would not surprise you that you just validated about 112 years of empirical research on effective leadership. And I would like to note that I didn't have to show one statistic for you to do that. So the interesting thing here, first observation of the afternoon I offer for your consideration. You know what great leadership is. Almost every one of you didn't hesitate to put down a name of a person on the upper left, the one who brought out the best in you. You know what great leadership is. Now you could be sitting there saying, why is he getting so excited? I started doing competency research. What are the characteristics that differentiate outstanding from average from poor performers in 1970? That was when I did the first study under that label. Since then, I've worked with colleagues at my former company, McBurr, now the Hay Group, and at Case Western Reserve at the university now as a professor for years here at Ca' Foscari, at ESADE, at London Business School. It's universities and consultancies around the world. We continue to find these differences in studies right up to today. The problem is, if you look at the data sideways, it says something very sobering. Half of the people in any organization, in management or leadership, including the managing director or the CEO, are not adding value on any measure. And another 20 to 30% of the people in these management jobs are adding value, but only on one measure, not on the others. That means that you could take, in your organizations, 70 to 80% of the people in management out of their management job, and the organization would function more smoothly. Now, you stop and think about this. This is a very, very depressing idea and observation. But I'm sure you're not worried. You know, as an American professor, I'll start on a depressing note, and I'll get more positive emotionally as my talk goes on. If I was a German professor, I'd start on a depressing note, and then I'd get even more depressing. But why is this so depressing? Because when you go to work, you are faced with an ocean of mediocrity. And what happens? You join the organization, you want to fit in, you want to be a good citizen, so you look to the people in the power positions and you say, okay, I should act that way. Or, you know, you want to be good, be seen as a citizen, a team player, your boss, you watch what your boss is doing, and so you try to act that way. The problem is most of the people you're looking at aren't very good at it. So we are in a dilemma where we recycle relative incompetence. I'm not saying that all of these people are not good at anything. I'm saying they're not good at management or leadership. And in fact, there's the rub, because most of them should never have been put in a management or leadership role. They're great as an individual contributor. So the dilemma that we have is that most of the time, we don't have a context for what's great leadership, except what you wrote down on the top of the left-hand column. That's why I got so excited. You know in your heart you have at least one good model in your life. Now, what does that tell us? Well, first of all, second idea I offer for this afternoon is that leadership is a relationship. You don't really care about the leader as much as what goes on between him or her and the people around them. That's the key, because you can't be a leader without followers. Definition. Therefore, we should spend more time thinking about studying, examining, working on the development of the quality of the relationship, not just the individual. And look at what you said. The leader who brought out the best in you, who literally activated your human capital, engaged you, motivated you, inspired you, created vision, empowered you, challenged you, did all of these things that were interactions that got you up and activated. And what about the person on the right who did not? They were negative, they were controlling, they were narrow, they did what suited them, they blamed others, all things that created distance. So we tried to capture what is it that we can say about this relationship from the field of physics for our 2002 book, Primal Leadership, which I think here in Italia was called Essere Leader. And we said the real distinction is that the quality of the relationship between effective leaders and the people around them is that they resonate with each other. They're in sync. They're in tune. Now, the dilemma with that is very often we're exposed to models that say, you know, the leader is the person at the top of the organization who sets the goals, the direction, the vision, the values, and gets everybody beneath them aligned. If you use the term alignment to mean this, then we agree. If you have used the term alignment to mean this kind of alignment, I got to tell you, it does not work. The research is unequivocally clear on this. This kind of top-down alignment does not work. And by the way, for those of us who are a little older in the crowd, it didn't work in the 50s. It didn't work in the 60s. So being nostalgic is an issue of just feeling that the past was better than it was because you don't remember how painful it was. And by the way, we've done this competency research in 94 countries, in private sector, public sector, not-for-profit sector, large, medium, and small organizations. And I can assure you it doesn't work anywhere. It doesn't work in the military. I spent 17 years leading teams of folks working on the US Navy and Marine Corps. Former doctoral students of mine and some current have been studying continue to study in the US military, British military. A friend, one of my colleagues at Assad, studies the Israeli Air Force. What any of us who study leadership in the military show in study after study is that outstanding military leaders do not engage in command and control. You know how that's a phrase that comes up when we think about it, but we're describing the large number of people who aren't very good at it. What the effective military leaders say in their words is what we do is ask and inspire, not command and control. And when you look into the high performance units, commando units, specialty units that do high incursion, secret units, they have this even more. It's all ask and inspire. So what that means is that we really have to think about this issue of how do you get in tune with the people around you? Let me use an analogy. How many of you are married or have a spouse or partner? Oh my God. No wonder there's a population problem. No, some more. You didn't raise your hands. You're married, right? You're still married, right? You didn't tell me. Okay. Okay, so this may not work then, but for those of you who have a relationship, are either married or have a partner, has your spouse or partner ever tried to align you on anything? You're saying sure. And how well did it work?
Quite always.
Quite always. You just yeah, right. See, that's the key for those of you who aren't yet in a relationship. And I know here in Italia, you know, you try not to get married till you're 40 or 45. Sorry, that's another sociological problem we could study here at Ca' Foscari, but anyway. Sorry, back to my topic. If in the most important relationship in our lives, we don't want to be aligned, which is why, we say things like, yes, dear, and things like that, what makes us think we want to be aligned at work? You're not going to show up, for those of you who are working, tomorrow or Monday at work and say, okay, here I am. I'm a human resource. Allocate my asset. It doesn't work that way. Because we don't go to work to get straightened out and dusted off. And we don't really go to work because we want to get aligned properly. Sorry, it's my obsessive compulsive thing. We go to work, and for those of you who are currently students and are not working, you may not believe this, but believe me, you do not go to work for the money. You go to work, we go to work because we want to add value. We want to be able to say at the end of the week or the month or the year, it mattered that I was there. I did something. I made a difference. At the end of our lives, as we face our God, we want to be able to say, I did what I was meant to do. That's why we go to work. And that's not just me as a psychologist talking. In a study of just a few years ago of 1,800 MBA graduates from throughout Europe, they studied, and these were MBA alumni who had been out at work for a year or two. And they asked them, why did you take the job you took, and why have you chosen to stay in it? Do you know where money, pay came in as the reasons? Seventh. Now, actually, I just remembered, that was before the recession. But still, it's now that, your country hasn't quite come out of it yet, but as each of our countries start to come out of the recession, this huge recession, what we're finding, and this is what's going on in the United States right now, and in Canada and the UK, and in some of the other countries in Japan, that the war for talent is back on. Companies can't find enough people that have the skills that they need or want. So what's happening is when people show those skills and abilities, companies compete and bid on them. So as this happens, like I said, I don't think it's happened yet in all parts of Italia, but as it starts to happen here, you'll see this war for talent come back. And this is going to be a key issue because why we go to work tends to be to make a difference, to learn and grow, to try something new, to add value. Now, we all know this in other settings. If you ever played in a band or you were on a sports team, you know that every time somebody moves, everybody else moves a little bit without saying anything. Operating room teams. One study showed that effective operating room teams, within 8 to 12 minutes, the doctors and nurses' pulse rates and skin conductance, both measures of stress, are going up and down in sync with each other. The less effective operating room teams, it's all over the place. Ladies, you know that if you played sports in high school or in college, that within 3 months of playing on a team, your menstrual cycles all got in sync with each other. And it wasn't because the captain said, okay, ladies, let's change. It turns out that it is yet another example of a biological imperative of what happens when human beings get together. So this notion of us being in tune with the people around us isn't just a fantasy about great relationships, it's how they really work. Now, what you started to say about the person on the left is, what kind of an experience do they create? And what we find in reviewing all the research on leadership is there are 3 in particular experiences that effective leaders seem to create. And one of them is, one of you mentioned vision, I think you did, sir. And that is one of the things that effective leaders do. They remind us of the purpose of the you said vision, right? Yeah, good. They remind us of the purpose of the organization. As adults, we don't learn unless we can attach new insight or information to a framework. What effective leaders do is they remind us, they use the purpose of the organization as the framework. And that's what we attach to. Now, I had the opportunity to see the CEO of a steam valve company, Ultimate Low Tech, kick off his meeting with his top 350 executives. And this was in Philadelphia, in the US. And he said, "Good morning." And the next thing out of his mouth is he talked about a small town about 300 miles north of where they were in New York State. And he said, "This town has one general hospital. And last year, this general hospital gave birth to 350 lives. Last year, this general hospital saved 1,800 lives through surgery and tertiary care. And none of it would have been possible if they didn't have 400 of our steam valves." He said this morning, and he mentioned a small town in western Pennsylvania, a few hundred miles from where they were meeting. He said parents got up, they got their children breakfast, they got them clothed, they got them off to school. They got dressed, they went to work. None of it would have been possible if the local gas and electricity companies didn't have 400 of our steam valves. And something in the room went click. People were sitting there saying, "Hey, you know, I don't make steam valves, I make steam valves." It wasn't a click of marketing, it was a click of meaning. People could attach what they're doing to purpose. This is perhaps one of the areas that many managers and leaders, or executives I should say, show how they lose contact with their customers, their technology, their products, their people. If you show me an executive who opens a meeting with financials, I'll show you an ineffective leader. Period. Why? Because when you open with financials, it's boring, first of all. Secondly, I'm not saying that the financials aren't important, but they are boring. Secondly, what are you saying to the people in the organization if the first thing you talk about is how much money we're making, or in a university setting, how we're doing to budget? What does it say to the people? I'm asking a question.
Seems like.
Seems what?
What they say to people.
Yeah, if they're opening a meeting and only talking about the financial numbers, what is it communicating? Yes, money's the most important issue.
How much do you get in the end?
Yeah, and how much do you have left over at the end? Not if you're in a university, are people learning? Have we discovered something new? If you're in a service, are you helping people? If you're in a bank, are you helping people exercise their maturity and their financial choices? Here's a key. There is no organization in the world whose purpose is to make money. None. It's a measure. Now let me talk about what money does do for us. Money is a measure of how well we're operating. But the confusion of the measure and the purpose is what leads and is a consequence of many people losing their effectiveness in leadership. But if you tie it to some sense of purpose or vision, it usually has, in most organizations, a higher noble purpose, and that is where it engenders hope. Second, several of you mentioned that the effective leader gave you a chance to do your job, believed in you, in a sense trusted you. Melvin Smith and Ellen Van Osten and I have been writing, Melvin and I in particular, for about 10 years now, about compassion and why it's so important in leaders. And I'm about to give you some physiological evidence in a few minutes about that. But by the way, I should say when we use the term compassion, we don't mean the Buddhist or Western interpretation of feeling for someone in pain. What's often in philosophical circles called more hedonic activity. We actually are using a Confucian interpretation of it, which comes out of the concept of benevolence, which is opening yourself up to others. So we contend that the act of compassion is an act of possibly helping someone in pain, but it also could be helping someone enjoy. It could be helping someone fix a problem they have. It could be helping someone grow and develop. And in that sense, we feel that what it communicates to the people around the leader is that they care. And guess what? If somebody cares about you, not you as a human resource, not your output, but you care back. So far beyond empathy, what's important in these relationships is caring. The third characteristic, one of you mentioned over here, which is we call mindfulness, a little bit of Buddhist philosophy in a current psychological jargon, but what it means is, am I awake and aware of what's going on in me, the people, the natural environment around me? The way it comes out is what I thought one of you said, which is the person in English jargon we'd say walks the talk. They enact their values. They are consistent. Or sometimes English words we'll use to label somebody who acts this way as a leader is we'll say they're authentic, they're genuine, they're transparent, they have integrity. Those are the words we'll more commonly use to capture this characteristic. What all of that put together does is the one litmus test of effective leadership. And there's just one thing. Are you inspirational? If you can't answer that yes, then you're not being an effective leader. You might be a nice person. You might be an effective problem solver. You might produce performance to predictable budgets, but doesn't mean you're an effective leader. There's one test of that. Do you activate the human capital at your disposal? Because if you don't, you're wasting the most precious capital you have. It's not the financial capital. The part that most people miss is the human capital. Those of us who are faculty members, those of you who are students, this translates in a learning experience to, does the faculty member create an experience in which you feel engaged, curious, excited? And if they don't, then they're not being an effective leader. Now, I should say, because a number of people in the audience, given your age, it either means you're really slow in learning or you work for a living now. Sorry, that was a bad joke. I know here in Italia, very often you don't have your undergraduate years from 18 to 21 like we do in the US. Because we think it's odd if somebody at 22 years old is still an undergraduate. As I understand, you stretch it out to more years, right? Okay, thank you. I just needed validation of that, or oh my God, wrong data. Okay, so this issue comes down to whether or not, on the whole, we're inspirational. Now, I say on the whole, and what that means is on the whole, when people leave your office or they leave an interaction with you, do they feel excited or challenged? Because on the whole means it's not going to be every day. You know, anybody north of 35 knows you don't want to maximize your performance every day at work. And to tell you the truth, some days you just have a bad empathy day. So, what we're talking about is, on the whole, do you get people excited? Now, how do we know this works? Besides the behavioral evidence, we did an fMRI study at the Cleveland Clinic, big, huge hospital, healthcare system based in Cleveland. And we had 49-year-old executives as our subjects. We did 2-hour interviews with them talking about leaders in their lives with which they had resonant relationships, leaders in their lives with which they had dissonant relationships. We extracted from those specific moments that each person had, 6 of them with resonant leaders, 6 with dissonant leaders. They came back in a few weeks later into an fMRI, a functional magnetic resonance machine. So they get strapped into the machine, their arms are strapped at their side, and they have little push buttons on their thighs. And we make a series of statements to each person, pre-recorded, about the specific moments they had with the resonant or dissonant leaders in their own life. And then they have to describe how it made them feel, what they thought of the leader, and those kinds of things. And what we found was very clear evidence that memories of moments with resonant leaders activated mirror neuron systems. Now, two professors, actually Italiani, Jacoboni and Rizzolatti, first documented the power of mirror neuron systems. Now, they got so excited that they overstated the case, so most neuroscientists dumped all over Jacoboni and Rizzolatti, from 2000 to 2010, until they started to say, okay, we overstated the case. But the reality is, we have systems in our brain called mirror neuron networks. And these networks allow us to mimic the actions of another. So if you're in a meeting and you go like this, other people all of a sudden are going to start going like this. If you yawn, other people are going to start to yawn. That's because of the mirror neuron networks. Memories of resonant leader. And this allows us to mimic actions of others. Memories of resonant leaders activated these. Memories of dissonant leaders deactivated them. Now, deactivated in fMRI language means suppressed. So, memories of dissonant leaders blocked your ability for your mirror neuron networks to be activated. Then we have the default mode network. A colleague of mine, Tony Jack, has just published a paper last fall showing that if you give people analytic problems, physics problems actually is what he used, but I think the same thing would happen with financial problems. Something that forces you to go into analytic mode, you activate a part of the brain called the task positive network. This is a part of the executive function. It's the part of your brain that is necessary for you to focus and solve a problem, to make a decision. The problem is the task positive network closes you down because of the focus. You don't notice what else is going on. You don't consider other things. When he gave people social situations, now these were undergraduates at Case Western, so one was a guy asking a girl out for a date, and she wasn't quite responding. Another one was two people, one of them was really upset, kind of talking to their friend about why they were upset. There were different situations like that. Those activated a part of the default mode network, which Tony calls the social network. Now, the default mode network is key. It's a whole network system in the brain, different depths, because that's the network that we need when we are open to new ideas. That's the network that activates where we can consider another person, emotions, moral concerns. What Tony showed was not only are these two networks almost completely different, there's very little overlap, but that they suppress each other. Okay, so every time you're in class, and this is especially a danger in MBA programs, because MBA programs typically don't teach you how to manage people, they teach you how to analyze managing people, which means you graduate functionally illiterate, but having all this knowledge about analysis. Now, the counterpoint are MBA programs that build in more interactive issues, more team projects, more community volunteer projects, more things where you're actually doing something with other people. But the key issue here is memories of resonant leaders activated the default mode network. Memories of dissonant leaders, 1/3 of the time activated it, 2/3 of the time suppressed it. So yes, your natural instinct to say when somebody was not a really engaging leader for you, you try to avoid them and all the situations that you were in. Your brain does the same thing. What you don't appreciate is how much your brain closes down when you're in that situation. I'll skip some of the other stuff. Here's, for example, the activation of the inferior frontal gyrus in response to the resonant leaders. So, what's going on here? I mean, this is all common sense, but it's not common practice. It's not common practice. So why? Well, here's the big culprit. Emotions are contagious. Positive or negative. You know that. You know, you've been at a party, been to a wedding, or been at a bar, and you're dancing and drinking and having good, sorry, not those of you who are younger, but you're dancing and drinking and having a good time. You want the night to go on forever. Then you've been at some management meeting where somebody is saying, well, your unit let us down. You didn't do that product launch right. And then, you're saying to them, well, you let us down, but you didn't manufacture it right. And you're sitting there saying, oh God, when can I get out of here? What you may not know is that emotions are contagious through the operation of these mirror neuron networks, but more importantly, what Jean Dossetti has shown, neuroscientist from the University of Chicago, is that there are these other networks called, technically he calls them hemodynamic sympathetic networks. They're like the social network that allow us to tune into others' feelings. So when you add the mirror neuron networks with these other social networks, we actually pretty much pick up what other people around us are thinking and feeling. And we're hardwired to do this. This doesn't matter whether you're male or female, whether you're Chinese, Italian, or Dutch. We're hardwired to do this. What you probably don't know is this happens in milliseconds. It happens very fast, way below consciousness. In 8 to 40 milliseconds, these things are transmitted between us. So if you were coming to work and you had an argument with your spouse in the morning, you know, it's one of these seething things, you're still arguing, or sorry, if you're younger, you had an argument with your parents, you know, and you come into school, and just before you get into the building, you're getting off of the train or the boat or whatever, and you say, okay, I'm not going to do this to my colleagues, so you put on a happy face. You walk in and say, good morning, good morning, good morning. You think you're spreading joy. What's happening is there's a bow wave of negative affect that's preceding you. Because what's happening is people aren't picking up the smile, they're picking up the stuff that you're sending out to them in 8 to 40 milliseconds before they can even register that you're smiling. So then, as this is happening, not only are they feeling lousy, but because you're smiling, they feel confused. Or, what's wrong with me? I feel lousy, but this person is smiling. And if you're in a position of responsibility, if you're a manager, if you're a teacher, if you're a parent, because people tune into you a little more, you're more contagious than others, this contagion hits really strongly, positively or negatively. Now, because of that, the effect of chronic stress on most of us leads us into dissonance. Chronic stress happens to us all the time. Most of us have 8 to 12 episodes of annoying stress on a good day. Annoying stress. Cell phone, you know, the cell company drops a call. Your computer doesn't boot up right. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Those are annoying stress, not acute stress. It's the sum total of those that brings us into ineffectiveness in most aspects of our lives, that leads us into dissonance. Now, how does that work? We need stress. We need stress, otherwise your body doesn't activate and you aren't protecting yourself from potential threats. So in an ecological sense, we need stress. But we are so overdosed with, well, I don't know about those of you who are the students in the room. If you're undergraduates, it's never clear whether or not you're still feeling overstressed or not. In some studies lately, they have claimed that undergraduates are feeling more and more stressed because of the social pressure. You know, you want to feel like you're cool, you're hot, whatever, and you want, sorry, I keep looking over here as if there are a lot of students over here. Some of you, you guys are students, right? Okay, but you're not. Okay, right, okay. So the key here is that this kind of overload of annoying stress is called chronic stress. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I'm running out of time and I haven't got to the meaty part yet. Is that what happens is, like I said, 8 to 40 milliseconds, it hits your thalamus, the amygdala in 8 milliseconds, 40 milliseconds, your neocortex. Your body starts to secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. Adrenaline, noradrenaline, the same thing. Now, what these are endocrines that constrict your blood vessels, your capillaries in your distal parts, to move blood to your large muscle groups, epinephrine in your arms, norepinephrine in your legs, to help the organism prepare to fight. What most people don't appreciate is they're also moving blood from your capillaries in your brain. So when you're under these annoying periods of stress, you don't have access to many of your neural networks. Secondly, we activate a whole series of endocrines, corticosteroids into the body, CRF, CRH, ACTH, finally cortisol. Cortisol helps you because it's your body's natural anti-inflammatory. So if you're about to get hit or bitten, your body will say, hey, keep going. Don't worry about it. And it helps you convert fat to glucose. But the problem is cortisol in your bloodstream stops your immune system. It turns it off. Within 8 to 12 minutes at the beginning of an annoying stress episode, your immunoglobulin A and natural killer T cells are significantly lower, which means you're very vulnerable to bacterial infections, viral infections, influenzas, type 2 diabetes, ulcers, and because of the epinephrine, norepinephrine, more strokes, heart attacks, hyperlipidemia, and because of the set of them, you have more sleep disorders, gastrointestinal difficulties, and sexual dysfunctions. Welcome to leadership. Okay, I told you one of the nasty things cortisol does. I didn't tell you the other. It stops neurogenesis. Peter Eriksson and his colleagues at the University of Sweden showed that adult humans grow neuronal tissue. The reason you have to grow new neurons is you're losing everyone in this room is losing about 85,000 neurons a day or dying. Now, when you're 24, you probably, if you have normal brain development, have about 100 billion, so you're okay for a while. But if you're not replacing them at a fairly heavy rate, by the time you hit the ripe old age of 35 to 40, your brains will start to look like the sponge quality of Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or dementia or prion patients. Neurogenesis, as Peter Eriksson and his colleagues documented, is the development of stem cells from your hippocampus and the conversion to new neurons. The problem is that process of neurogenesis is stopped by the presence of cortisol. So not only when you're under chronic stress do you not have access to parts of your neural networks, but you can't learn very well. And we know from studies that if, most of us have peripheral vision of 180 to 270 degrees, and under chronic stress it drops to 30 degrees. We become closed to new ideas. We become closed to other people. We become closed to people who are different than we are. We become closed to emotions. We become closed to moral considerations of how other people may be affected. All of these things are significantly narrowed. And under chronic stress, you are under conditions of cognitive, perceptual, and emotional impairment, period. Now, one quick example, since many people here are in higher education. Let me use an example of how we mess around with this ineffectively as faculty. Tests. Do any of you have tests in your courses?
On May.
I'm sorry?
On May, we will have tests.
In May you'll have tests, but you have tests, a lot of tests, right? Okay, when you study for a test, how do most people study for tests?
Reading, notes.
Yeah, when?
Information. When?
When do you study for the test?
After
The day before, a week before. Huh? No? You prepare every month? Oh, you're a very good person. You're a good student. Okay. I'm sure your mother and father tell you you're special, but you're different. No, but really, most people study for tests by what's called cramming. Okay, now, research has been very clear on this. The more you cram, the higher your forget rate goes. So the two faculty of a top 20 ranked MBA program in the US showed 27.4-year-olds in the full-time MBA, the half-life of knowledge from their required first course in accounting was 6.5 weeks. That meant they were forgetting half of what they had put on the test 6.5 weeks earlier. So your forget rate, how quickly you dump the stuff that you think you've learned, is very fast. The more you cram, the quicker you dump stuff. And by the way, it's not just there that you can't access, it's gone.
Where's the emotion?
The emotion, that's right. Well, that's what drives it. So here's a study tip. If you want to learn something new, the research now says study in 15 to 20-minute spurts. Study for 15 or 20 minutes, then do something else, then go back and study. You'll increase how much you can retain. Also, by the way, and this is very challenging for certain students, you need 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep a night to remember what you studied the day before. Now, as faculty, we often give tests. Why? Because it's convenient. We don't do it because it's a commitment to learning. A friend of mine writes books on chefs and how chefs are trained. And he wrote this book about this year-long chef training program in the United States, in New York. And on the week that they were doing soups, one of the people he was watching had Tom Yum Goong soup, a Thai soup to prepare the next day. At the end of the morning, this chef student wasn't given a multiple choice quiz on what are the ingredients in Tom Yum Goong soup. He had to prepare Tom Yum Goong soup for 6. And he brought the 6 bowls to the faculty member. And then they each looked at each bowl, they looked at the broth, they smelled the aromas, they tasted them. That's what's called a performance assessment. So as faculty, we would be a lot more effective in helping students learn if we converted tests to performance assessment. How do we do that? We do projects, we do field work, we do things where you have to create or invent or produce something using the knowledge. And yet, how often in all of our universities, all over the world, do we revert to testing? Did you remember this? And the fact is that it's not a good way to go about it because it induces stress. So that's just one example. Now, if things were that bad, for those of you who have been executives or professionals for a while, and with all of these horrible things that go on as a result of stress, you could ask yourself, how come you're not dead? 2 possibilities. One, you are, and you have to decide, is this your version of heaven or hell? But in reality, this is why. Our bodies have an alternative system to rebuild themselves. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system. When you see a baby laugh, you get a smile on your face. When you see a puppy, a 5-month-old puppy, roll around in the grass, you get a smile on your face. That is actually the activation of your vagal nerve. You then go into this parasympathetic nervous system. You secrete more oxytocin, primarily if you're female, vasopressin if you're male. These are vasodilators at this dosage level. They open up your blood vessels. So now all of a sudden, your blood is flowing much further. Pressure goes down, blood pressure, pulse rate. Your breathing slows down, gets deeper. It is in this parasympathetic nervous system state that your immune system clicks into high gear. It's working its best here. It is in this state that you are the most cognitively capable. You're doing the best creativity. You can handle the most complex concepts. It is in this state that neurogenesis occurs. This is the state in which you're feeling optimistic, hopeful, engaged, excited, not necessarily happy, but all these other things. Now, how do we know that we can do this? Well, the basic issue is if you don't do something every day to counterbalance the stress, you become non-sustainable as an organism. And if you're in school, it may not matter a lot, but you're not performing and you're not learning. You're kind of wasting time. If you're at work, the sacrifice syndrome starts to drag you down. And you know what that feels like. You know, you hit a Friday night, you kind of stagger home, you feel like somebody sucked the blood out from you. You could barely make it to, you know, your bar at home to pour a drink. The problem is that we have to counterbalance it. And medical research now tells us that if you practice meditation, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system. If you practice yoga, you do. If you exercise, but within modest realms, not so you're pushing yourself too hard. If you do Tai Chi, it's been proven. If you get massage, it's been proven. If you pray, but here, if you pray, the prayer has to be to a loving God. Turns out if you're praying to a guilt-inducing or vengeful God, it stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. If you feel hopeful about the future, it does this. If you're in a loving relationship, it does this. If you have dogs, cats, horses, or monkeys as pets, it does this. That's proven. Actually, that's the one that's been proven since the 70s. It doesn't work with fish, sorry if any of you have fish, because it turns out it's the stroking that the human does of the pet that brings this out. Of course, I had an executive MBA student from ESADE in one of my sessions last year, and he said, well, I have a pet snake. I said, you know, I just said it's the stroke. He said, well, sometimes I take the snake out and I stroke it. And I listened to him, I said, I'm a psychologist. Do you really want me to interpret that? And he got red in the face and he said, no. But anyway, helping others in need, volunteering, helping people less fortunate, helping people who are disabled, helping elderly parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. And the one that was not in our 2005 book, but by 2009, the research data became very clear. So I feel that we must put it on here, is laughter, joy, and playfulness activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So what we find is really compelling is that not only do these four experiences help us renew ourselves and sustain ourselves at the organism level, but at least three of these, and I suspect that laughter does, helps us build better relationships. So the question then in our mind is, what helps us get there? Well, emotional and social intelligence are the constituent abilities that enable you to do these things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. You've got a whole center here to help teach you about that. Does it pay off in dollars and cents? Yeah, we've got, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of these studies showing increased profit contribution. This is from an international consulting company. This company, I think, has 65,000 accountants working for them. About the increased operating profit contributed by partner from their accounts per year. I annualized it, did it longitudinally from all these competencies. So all of that's to get around to this. How do we develop this stuff? Okay, next exercise. We're going to go into how you develop this stuff, but again, like before, we're going to spend some time working on it, how you did it. I'd like you to create 3 columns and 3 rows. Now we're going to work on this exercise 6 different ways, literally, so you really do have to do it. Some more people need paper here. Who had the paper? I have a few people have come in who need paper and pens. Okay, so now here's the thing. I want you to think about your life in a different way than you have. Typically, you think about your resume. Now what I'd like you to do is answer the question, who helped you the most in your life? Think of your whole life. Who has helped you the most become who you are or get to where you are? And write down the names of at least 3 of those people, and then we'll go a little further in terms of what you'll do about each one. Who has helped? Who would you say, I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for X? I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for Y. People in your life who have helped you the most.
How many? 1 or
3. I try to do. If you think of more than 3, yeah, put their names here. If you think of more than 3, you could write them at the bottom, but right now we're only going to work with the first 3. Okay, now as you think of the first person's name, in the second box, I want you to remember a moment with them in which you learned something. And you probably had a lot of them, but just let your memory sift through to one that was key. And then in the second box, remembering that one moment, what did the person say or do? And then in the third box, write down what you learned or took away from it, not necessarily at the time, but later. Do that for each of the three, and then we'll start to talk about them.
Have it.
I'm sorry? Okay. You're thinking of three people who have helped you the most in your life, become who you are or get to where you are. For each one, you're thinking of one moment in which you felt you learned something. What did that person say or do? That's the second box. And the third box is, what is it you learned or took away from it as you reflected on it afterwards? Sometimes at the moment you don't remember, don't realize it.